Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and well, that's over with. Ravens defensive coordinator Mike MacDonald has now been hired by the Seattle Seahawks on a 6-year deal. We got to talk about that. Of course, I'm hurt because Mike MacDonald is a Georgia dog, so I was really rooting for getting him. So I know a lot of y'all are disappointed because a lot of us thought he could be a top head coach, but it hurts a little bit more for me because he is a Georgia dog. So I was really rooting for us to get him, but that time has passed. It's now to move on and look towards the future. We're going to talk about Mike MacDonald for a little bit, but we got to now focus our attention on who we may end up getting next. Like, do we open up our coaching search? We'll technically reopen it up to where we add Mike Vrabel in there. We haven't interviewed him yet. Do we add him into the list of candidates just simply because we missed on one of our top guys? Really, it looks like all of our top guys. Also, Adam Peters, our GM, is apparently headed to the Senior Bowl right now. So we got to dive into everything like who's left for the Commanders. It's time to do a deeper dive into the last remaining head coaching candidates. So as of right now, out of the guys we've interviewed, you have Aaron Glenn, Anthony Weaver, and Dan Quinn. And technically Eric Bieniemy. But do we open this search all the way back up and interview Mike Vrabel for the first time? And then also, again, Adam Peters is reportedly already headed to the Senior Bowl. What is going on? We haven't even hired a head coach yet. We will be the only team at the Senior Bowl without a head coach. That's crazy. So we got to dive into all of that and more, but before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release the informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure we do not panic. Be patient. We had all of this excitement about us hiring Adam Peters. Let's go ahead and give these guys the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're going to handle things the right way. So we're gonna dive into everything. Of course, y'all know me, man. I'm ready to talk draft. I'm ready to talk free agency. I've been ready to talk all of that stuff and do film sessions, do more mock drafts and things like that for the longest. But all of these reports keep coming out, and I want to keep giving y'all these updates just in case, you know, there's a select few out there that may only watch me and listen to me. So I want to make sure you're caught up on every little thing that the Commanders have going on, no matter how small or big. But y'all know I can't wait to go ahead and get this head coaching thing done so we can focus on coordinators. Then we get the positional coaches in, and then I can just completely focus on free agency and the draft, which is arguably my favorite part of the year. I'm not gonna lie. But let's go ahead and get to this video. Let's get it. All right, so go ahead and cross Mike MacDonald off of the coaching candidates list right now. And unless, again, we reopen our search, right now all we have left as out of guys that we've already interviewed and shown clear interest in are Dan Quinn, Aaron Glenn, and Anthony Weaver. That's it, unless we want to reopen it for Mike Vrabel, which we'll talk about later. But as of right now, the Washington Commanders are the only team in the NFL without a head coach, which is crazy. 7 teams have already hired theirs. We're that one lonely 8th team that hasn't. Just to run down, Chargers got Jim Harbaugh, Falcons got Raheem Morris, Panthers got Dave Canales, Patriots got Gerard Mayo, Raiders got Antonio Pierce, Seahawks got Mike MacDonald, and the Titans got Brian Callahan, and the Commanders got who? Well, that's still pending N/A unknown. We have no idea yet. So again, if we stick with the current pool of guys that we've already interviewed, everybody is a defensive-minded guy. There are no offensive-minded guys available unless we're talking potentially like an Eric Bieniemy. Everybody else is defensive-minded. Even if you do open it back up and consider a Mike Vrabel, who we have never shown any interest in. We have not officially interviewed him, not even virtually yet. Even he's a defensive-minded guy. So it looks like we're going from all of these top offensive-minded candidates to now defensive-minded only, again, unless you give Eric Bieniemy a chance. Now, shouts out to DC Experience because I completely agree with this. On paper, it's weird how Mike MacDonald didn't become top priority for ownership and Peters, but again, we fans know nothing. But with Eugene Shin connection and even Mike MacDonald's wife apparently being from the area, she was a cheerleader for the Redskins and everything, it is weird that we weren't able to pull that together. That's really weird. But again, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to have faith in this coaching staff and this front office and everything that we got going on, this new ownership under Josh Harris. He's done everything right so far. He shot 100% from the field, and maybe he's missed a little bit, but I don't think he's completely missed. I think we're going to end up hiring the right guy, and let's break down who these guys potentially are. Now you have Ravens defensive lines coach / associates head coach Anthony Weaver. Even though he was the defensive coordinator for the 4-12 2020 Houston Texans, I would blame a lot of that more so on their offense than their defense. But that's really the only negative. I mean, also there's the unknown. I mean, if you're afraid of the unknown, I'd prefer the unknown over like a Dan Quinn. We'll talk about that later. But if you're afraid of the unknown, then maybe that's another negative for you. But that's really about it right now because there's not a lot of information on him. But I'm hearing from a lot of people coming out of nowhere the past few days that are speaking very highly of him. Like JP Finley said, he texted with somebody that knows Ravens assistant head coach Anthony Weaver well and described him as, quote, one of the best people I've ever met in my life, unquote. And I don't really know how that exactly leads to him being a top head coaching candidate specifically, but a lot of people are raving about him, and that's just one of the very few quotes. Also, don't forget the fact that, again, not only was he a defensive lines coach, but he was the associate head coach. So when it comes to running a lot of the team things, like behind the scenes things, making sure everything is moving well, not just the X's and O's, he does have some experience there, basically being John Harbaugh's right-hand man this past season. So that is something interesting. Also, Anthony Weaver was also the run game coordinator for the Ravens and helped lead the search for their offensive coordinator, as in my Georgia dog, Todd Monken. I don't know if this makes him necessarily like the best candidate out there, but this is a guy that could potentially recruit a good offensive coordinator because he went out and even though Todd Monken completely laid an egg in that playoff game against the Chiefs, maybe he could find another guy, because it's not even just finding the guy, it's being able to recruit and get that guy, because Todd Monken could have easily have stayed with my Georgia Bulldogs. He could have gotten an opportunity elsewhere, but Anthony Weaver apparently was one of the main reasons why Todd Monken chose to go to the Ravens out of all other places he could have landed. So that's very noteworthy. Also, you just never know. Again, a big unknown, but this could be the next Mike Tomlin. Like, if we're talking about any potential head coaching candidate that was available this entire cycle, you can argue that he may be the closest thing to Mike Tomlin, especially when we're talking personality, between him and Aaron Glenn. Speaking of that, let's go ahead and talk about Aaron Glenn. I've heard a lot of different people say that even though Ben Johnson is a genius, I'm not taking anything away from him. Even though he said no to us, he's still an offensive genius. But a lot of people are saying that Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell are the alphas in that coaching room. Those are the leaders of men right there. And I've also, like I pointed out before, I give him the most credit for that Lions win over the Rams in the wild card round. I'm not saying I prefer him over Ben Johnson, but just simply because he told us no. I still prefer Ben Johnson, but I just want to give y'all Aaron Glenn's positives as well to give you a glass half full perspective. Now, I don't have much deeper dives to do on those guys today in this video. If we end up hiring one of those guys, then I'll do like a way deeper dive on each one of those guys, whoever ends up getting hired. But I just wanted to give y'all those basic things about each of those candidates. Now let's move on to Dan Quinn, and we're going to talk about him just a little bit more than the other guys, just simply because, first of all, he's the only one that has previous head coaching experience out of any candidate left available. Again, not including Mike Vrabel, because we haven't even interviewed him yet, even though we will talk about him later in the video. But he has the most experience and all of that type of stuff, so we're going to talk about him a little bit longer. But of course, if we end up hiring Dan Quinn, I'll do an even deeper dive on him than I am doing this video. This is still more of like a long story short situation. But my boy Ethan Cadeau brought up a great point on Twitter. Under Josh Harris's watch, the 76ers and Devils have hired multiple head coaches with prior head coaching experience: Nick Nurse, Doc Rivers, and Lindy Ruff. So it's not surprising that Dan Quinn, a former head coach who is well respected across the NFL, is in the mix for this upcoming Commanders gig. This could just be a simple trend that Josh Harris just always follows. He's not hiring a head coach that wasn't already a head coach somewhere else potentially. Now, it looked like with this much as we were going in on Ben Johnson and Mike MacDonald and all of these guys, and we just simply missed on them, that we were willing to do that this time around for his first attempt at an NFL franchise. But history has shown that he's only been hiring seasoned veterans. So if you want to try to put that spin on it, maybe you could. We'll see. But now, also, like I've talked about in my last video, Logan Paulson on his podcast with Craig Hoffman talked about how Dan Quinn called everybody that he could to self-evaluate after getting fired by the Falcons, asking anybody that would listen what he could have done better in any way possible. And even though I don't like Dan Quinn as a candidate, honestly, like in my personal opinion, I'm not a big Dan Quinn fan at all, but you can't do anything but respect that. And hopefully, looking at it from a glass half full side of things, he is a guy that knows his own history and is not doomed to repeat it. Because you know the famous saying, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. This is a guy that was like, all right, that Falcons thing the wheels just fell off at a certain point. We were so high and mighty. We were in the Super Bowl up 28-3, and then suddenly the wheels fell off, and we just never recovered. And this guy went through extra lengths to figure out, okay, what did I do wrong? So if I end up with another head coaching opportunity, I can fix those things, no matter how small and how big. And again, I can't do anything but respect that. Again, I'm not a big Dan Quinn fan, but that's noteworthy. And I also want to point out the fact that that is not something that I can necessarily see Rivera doing, or at the very least, I have not heard anybody say that he has at the very least. So we'll see how this goes. And also, even though Dan Quinn's record without Kyle Shanahan is bad, I think he does deserve some credit for even being able to recruit Kyle Shanahan to the Falcons. Hopefully he can find the next Kyle Shanahan, but of course, when it comes to any defensive-minded head coach, it's already hard enough to find the first great offensive coordinator that can run your offense completely, but you better be ready to find another one very soon, with the way that teams are always trying to steal another team's offensive coordinator to make them their head coach. You see Dave Canales, after 1 year with the Buccaneers, becoming the head coach for the Panthers, and everybody was trying to get Bobby Slowick until he returned. It's a struggle out here, man. And then now the Texans, even though Bobby Slowick's returning for 1 more year, who's to say that he doesn't go become a head coach after the 2024 season? So they've only had him for 2 years, and now he's gone. They got to find another offensive coordinator. So it's just one of those things where even if you hit on the first offensive coordinator, which is already a difficult thing to do, what are your chances of being able to hit on the next one as well? And so far, Dan Quinn hit on the first one, but he wasn't able to hit on that second one. He hit on Kyle Shanahan, and then after that, it was pretty ugly. But his ability to recruit Kyle Shanahan should not be glossed over. And even though I do prefer Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, Mike MacDonald way more than I prefer Dan Quinn, with his experience around the NFL, you could easily argue that he is the candidate with the longest network and the most connections out of everybody that we're talking about. Again, not including Mike Vrabel, and even if you throw Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, and Mike MacDonald back into the pile, you could easily argue that he has the longest network and most connections. So even though as a head coach alone, I don't love him, but out of all of the top candidates in the cycle, again, including Ben, Bobby, and Mike, you can argue that he has the best ability to put together the best staff around him. Basically, I'm saying that his name is good around the NFL and his word holds weight. So that is something that, you know, that's kind of a positive in his favor. Him isolated as a head coach, I prefer arguably anybody else over him, but at the same time, when it comes to being able to put the best staff around him, having connections and relationships with coaches all around the NFL, you can argue Dan Quinn, his runs the longest and the deepest out of any of the top candidates, again, even including Ben, Bobby, and Mike. Also, Ben Standig brings up a great point. Dan Quinn was typically viewed as second, maybe third most attractive head coaching candidate this cycle, depending on whether eyeing Harbaugh or not. The playoff loss was a perception setback, no doubt, but the reasons for liking him remain. Sources here in Mobile, Alabama, where the Senior Bowl is going down and all NFL teams are at, are quick to push back on any negative Quinn talk because of that loss that the Cowboys just took against the Packers, because that is really bad PR for him. Like, that messed up everything, because going into that game, before that game happened, that big loss and his defense looked terrible against the Packers, I said I don't necessarily want him as a head coach, but I love him as a defensive coordinator. And then that Packers game was just like, now I'm not sure about either one. So, I mean, I gotta have to admit that, man, that one loss shouldn't define him. And JP Finley agrees. He says when a dude has 11 years experience as a coordinator or coach, one game should not be the difference. But how I push back against that, at the same time, it does seem like whenever the lights are the brightest, his teams and defenses just seem to fold one way or another. They just find a way to not get it done. Again, as a head coach or defensive coordinator, when it matters most, some reason things just collapse in front of him. I don't know what it is. So I agree with Ben Standig and JP Finley when they say that like one game or a couple of games shouldn't define him, because overall he has done more good than bad, but it just seems like when it matters the most, it ends up being bad, and that makes me uncomfortable. And now I know I'm all over the place, going from negative to positive, negative to positive, and all of that type of stuff, really just running through a string of thoughts and opinions right now. But another thing I do like about Dan Quinn is that I've heard that he made sure that Matt Ryan listened to the young and up and coming Kyle Shanahan, because like early on in their relationship, Matt Ryan had slightly different ideas and views from Kyle Shanahan, and most head coaches would just let the quarterback, the veteran quarterback who's been here longer than the offensive coordinator, just run the show. I mean, it's Matt Ryan, but Dan Quinn stepped in and made sure Matt Ryan heard Kyle Shanahan out fully and was like, you need to listen to this guy and y'all need to make this work. And I respect that, Dan Quinn. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of head coaches probably wouldn't do that. Also, if they pick Dan Quinn, it's more than likely because of experience, leadership, culture, all of that type of stuff, and they are banking on him to bring in the right people to handle the X's and O's on the side of things, especially when it comes to offense. But at the same time, a lot of the top offensive coordinator candidates are already tanking. So you have like Clint Kubiak, who is a potential name to watch, like I broke down in my previous video why he could potentially be a good candidate. And then if we end up hiring him, I could do like a super deep dive on him as well, but I talked about him briefly in my previous video. And then also Eric Bieniemy standing as an offensive coordinator seems more likely if you hire a guy like Dan Quinn or any of these defensive minded head coaches, honestly. But again, like I've said before, if we actually wanted Dan Quinn, he would have been hired already. So if we end up picking him, that's gonna look a little weird, because it looks like we picked him not because of we actually really wanted him, but it's kind of like, well, I mean, you're the best of what's left. Let's just go ahead and give it a try. Hey, come on down, Dan Quinn. It's the best we could do at this point. Like, that's not a great look. Typically, you want your owner and your GM to hire a head coach like, man, this was our guy from the very beginning. But, you know, we all know at this point that would be a lie. No matter really who they hire at this point, you could tell they wanted Ben Johnson, Mike MacDonald, or Bobby Slowick the most. And that's who I wanted the most, and it's clear that it really looks like that's who they wanted the most as well. Now let's move on to Mike Vrabel, because this is very interesting, man. Shouts out to Burgundy Blog for bringing this up. Last vacancy, so no need to rush right now, but also no information left to collect. So I think that the only reason for further delay would be a new or unknown candidate, which would also be the only scenario in which Harrison Peters could plausibly claim total success. So as of right now, Burgundy Blog is saying, I mean, all of the top candidates that we thought we were interested in are gone, so no need to rush. And the reason that we're kind of just chilling right now, and the only way that they can redeem themselves and look good on the PR side of things, is if we bring in a random person that nobody expected. That might be the only way to flip this to where the fans aren't just immediately grumpy and upset with who we hire. Because if it's Dan Quinn, whoo, boy, that fan base is going to be upset. Now, speaking of guys that we don't know of, guys that we have not interviewed yet, that we have not shown interest in, there goes Mike Vrabel, which takes me to the point that he's very interesting because, again, we've never even interviewed him at all yet, not even like virtually. So do the Commanders completely just reopen their head coaching search, start all the way over, and reach out to somebody that they didn't previously show any interest in at all? Because that would be a pretty ugly look if they did, I'm not gonna lie. Because that means that they expected to hire either Mike MacDonald, Bobby Slowick, or Ben Johnson and missed on all three. And now they would be backpedaling a little, just to be completely honest. But at the same time, for them to have the humility to admit that they messed up and then have the ability to start from ground zero and get what I would believe to be a better candidate would actually be pretty commendable. Like, we would have to give them a little bit of credit there, like to just be like, yeah, man, we messed up. We missed on everybody we really wanted. So we started from ground zero. We admit that we made a mistake, and we're ready to just go ahead and find a new guy. We feel like this guy is better than these other three guys, and we truly believe that. So we went and got him. Even though we hadn't shown any previous interest in him, we went and got our guy potentially. That's a way to spin it for it to look a little positive. At the end of the day, all of this PR stuff I keep bringing up really doesn't matter. All that matters is if we win. That's really all that matters. But if you're looking at it from a PR side, that's a way that they could potentially win, man. And Mitchell Tisler brings up a great point. As long as Mike Vrabel isn't asking for complete player personnel control, you could argue that he is the top guy out there right now. If the Commanders are taking this detailed wide approach, it's hard to imagine a scenario that he doesn't at least interview with the team at this point. We're going to talk about it later in this video, but Adam Peters is going to the Senior Bowl right now. It seems like he's not even worried about head coach. Like, yeah, man, at this point, everybody we wanted is gone. We'll just focus on head coach after the Senior Bowl, man. I got more important things to do right now, type of thing. So we'll see. And remember, Mike Vrabel was only fired because he and the recently hired GM for the Tennessee Titans did not see eye to eye at all. Remember that draft video when the Titans drafted Will Levis and how clearly and visibly upset Mike Vrabel was? That was crazy. And the Titans just simply chose the GM over Mike Vrabel. It was one or the other. They chose Jim, and that's why Mike Vrabel ended up getting fired. But I think it is noteworthy, though, on the negative side, that as a defensive-minded head coach, his Titans defenses were never arguably great, never elite, never one of the top defenses. Also, you know, being perpetually average scares me to death, and Vrabel has been slightly below average to slightly above average for a while now. Like, I mean, at best good, maybe a little great, but still underperforming no matter the season, because 2018, 9-7, 2019, 9-7, those are the worst records you can have to me. That's the most pointless thing you can be in the NFL, is that ugly middle. But then 11-5, won their division, but didn't do much in the playoffs. 12-5, won their division, didn't do anything in the playoffs. They lost the divisional round. And then 7-10, and then 6-11, they saw things were trending downward. It was like, yeah, we can go ahead and move on from this, basically. And so the key to both Dan Quinn and Mike Vrabel, no matter who you pick, is hiring the right offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. You gotta hit on both, no matter who you hire at this point. At least with Ben Johnson and Bobby Slug, you were like, all right, then we just got to figure out who defensive coordinator will be. With Mike MacDonald, it was like, okay, maybe if we can find the right offensive coordinator, we're good. But with Dan Quinn and Mike Vrabel, I'm worried about defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator. So it does make things more difficult, but it does not make things impossible now. So again, just be patient. We'll see what the Commanders are cooking up behind the scenes right now. Now, also, again, I just want to point out the fact that maybe you give Eric Bieniemy a shot, because he's really the only offensive-minded guy left. And if you really want to force it, like really want to force it and go with an offensive-minded head coach, no matter what, because that's where the trend of the NFL is going right now, then I guess that shit got highly doubt it happens, highly doubt it happens. But then again, we never know at this point, because we thought Ben Johnson was very likely, and we saw how that went. And I thought at a certain point, especially like a week ago, I thought at the very least we would get one of the top three guys. I feel like we couldn't miss. Now we ended up getting neither of them. This is crazy. Now let's talk about basically my conclusion, my last final thoughts on all this situation, and we're going to talk about the Senior Bowl towards the end. Shouts out to Michael Phillips for bringing up this point. The optics problem here is that they've been in a room with Quinn, Glenn, and Weaver in the last 48 hours and didn't leave with any of the three. I'm not of this, quote, this is a disaster, unquote, camp. But it's tough to explain that you got your top guy when you let him sit for 24 to 48 hours. And that's my exact point right now. On the PR side, it's looking really ugly, because if you really like Dan Quinn or Anthony Weaver or Aaron Glenn, you would have been hired them. You wouldn't have waited this long. Now it looks like they're kind of like the backup options. Like, yeah, I guess, because everybody else that we really wanted is gone. We'll settle with you type of situation. That's not even getting off to a good start with either of these candidates. So I don't know. This is an ugly situation, I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, the Chargers gave Jim Harbaugh $16 million a year. The Panthers gave Dave Canales 6 years. The Seahawks gave Mike MacDonald 6 years right now. Coaches are winning the negotiations right now, and maybe that's why we ended up missing out on all of those guys. Josh Harris and Adam Peters weren't willing to commit to a head coach that deeply by paying them Jim Harbaugh money or giving them Dave Canales or Mike MacDonald extensive year contracts, which is really interesting, something to think about. Also, shouts out to Chris Cooley for this, because I agree quite a bit with this one. Not 100%, but quite a bit. I genuinely don't think the head coach search could have gone any worse than it has. Watching your options dwindle to almost nothing is extremely disappointing. But even with that, I still have full confidence in Peters being able to shape this team moving forward. I completely agree with that last part. Also, shouts out my boy Mike Hall at the Burgundy podcast over there with my boy the Podfather, all of them. My boy TBZ Money Mike 301 on Twitter. Follow him. He said, not saying it's the same old with the organization, because I know it's not. But man, to be getting the scraps of the head coaching candidates left that were all available feels pretty mad. I do agree with that, man. We'll see how we can spin it. We'll see how we can try to glass half full of the situation based on whoever we hire. But it is a little ugly. And man, with how ugly this has gotten, I wouldn't be surprised if no matter who we hire at this point, we hire them on a short-term deal with the potential to jump back into the head coaching search within like the next 2 years or something. Yeah, I would not be surprised at all. I really wouldn't. And also remember, people thought the Texans were crazy for hiring and firing head coaches so quickly, back to back to back. And now look at them. They will hire a guy for 1 year. He didn't do well, fire him. Hire another guy 1 year, didn't do well, fire him. Then they landed on DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Slowick, and look at where they are now. Second overall pick to winning the division and even winning one playoff game. Like, come on, bro. I mean, it's very possible. As ugly as things look, there's always a way to climb out of it. And the Texans showed you that exact way. And it was so happen that we have that same second overall pick as them and the potential to draft our franchise guy like a CJ Stroud. But also, no matter who they hire, I honestly feel like they deserve the benefit of the doubt until they don't. At least I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt until they lose it. I mean, we were this excited about hiring Adam Peters. What's the point if we can't trust him to make the right decisions moving forward? And B. Mitch brings up a great point as well. Quote, if everybody believed in Adam Peters, Rick Spielman, and Bob Myers last week, and they go and give somebody a 5-year deal to coach, everyone should believe in him as well, unquote. And I mean, a 5-year deal may be pushing it a little bit, but I do agree with that logic that, again, that we were so excited about Adam Peters and Josh Harris and Eugene Shen and all of these guys, Magic Johnson. No matter who they hire a head coach, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt, because again, what was the point of being this excited about this group we put together in the front office for us to just completely and immediately doubt whoever they hire as head coach, just simply because us fans don't like them? And like John Com said, wait until December to judge the hire, no matter who it is, to be completely honest. Of course, we can have our opinions right now, but don't just give up on the fan base. Don't not go to the games or anything like that just simply because of who we hired as a head coach. Now, of course, I'm not extra plugged in, so I don't know this for sure, but it does really seem like we were going all in on Ben Johnson and we're flying to Detroit to get that deal done and not let him leave the room without hiring him as a head coach. Maybe he knew that ahead of time and was like, yeah, before they even get here, let me go ahead and deny this now. Let me go ahead and call this off now, because he probably felt like once he gets in a room with these guys, they're going to be persuasive and convince him to become a head coach when he feels like he may not even be ready. And so we were then surprised when he took his name off the candidates list and then returned to the Lions, and now we're just kind of stuck in limbo a little bit. Now also, let's talk about Martin Mayhew and this whole Senior Bowl situation. John Com reported that Martin Mayhew will be at the Senior Bowl. He headed there with Adam Peters and other scouts. Eric Stokes is already there. Mayhew is expected to remain with Washington through their title that remains uncertain. The team has not yet made any formal announcement about this role, but it seems like Martin Mayhew is here to stay for at least this year. And there's two big, really interesting parts about this. First of all, Martin Mayhew is staying with the team in some capacity, and I'm gonna probably do a deep dive into that in a separate video in itself, so stay tuned for that. But long story short, I don't really mind, because him and Adam Peters go way back. They worked together for years with the 49ers. So that is somebody that Adam Peters, the guy that we all love and are excited about, really trusts. And as long as Martin Mayhew doesn't have any significant power or say, no last say or anything, I'm cool. He's just an extra brain there, an experienced brain, a guy that Adam Peters trusts to give a slight opinion on things. But I'm pretty sure Adam Peters is running the show, so I'm not worried about it. And again, Nikki Javala officially reported off of the John Com report that Martin Mayhew is expected to remain with the Commanders at least for this year. We'll see what the title is exactly. But the second thing that's really noticeable is that we haven't hired a head coach yet. So what are you doing at the Senior Bowl, Adam Peters? I'm excited that he's going there, of course, because his history has shown that he finds and drafts great talent out of the Senior Bowl. And this first draft has to hit for us to get the Super Bowl contender roster going. Like, this first draft is huge. This can either set us back a few years or help us expedite this process into turning into a Super Bowl contender by a few years as well. It's one or the other. This first draft is like the first step in either the wrong direction or the right direction. So this is big time. But You not helping with the coaching search anymore right now, Adam Peters? Like, have you already picked the guy? Or are you just so disgusted with who's left that you're just like, F it, man. We'll just hire some guy after the Senior Bowl, no rush. We're focused on the Senior Bowl at this point because all of the candidates left, we're not worried about them getting a job elsewhere. So we'll just call up one of them eventually and be like, hey, come be the head coach for the Commanders, whatever type of thing. Also, shouts out my boy Mason Kinahan for pointing this out. With Washington's front office and mobile today, I expect some form of an announcement to be made about the Commanders head coaching search today. So Adam Peters being there is significant because I'm assuming that, yeah, maybe they already have a guy, or like I said, maybe they're just so disgusted with the situation that they're not even worried about it. But either way, at some point today, this evening, tonight, we should get some type of information coming out about what's going on. And so again, Adam Peters and Martin Mayhew are headed to the Senior Bowl, but Eric Stokes and other scouts are already there. And I think it's significant that even though we already had other guys there, Martin Mayhew and Adam Peters are still going there themselves as well. I mean, it's like we don't necessarily need them there, and the fact that they feel the need to go there while we're in a coaching search is very telling. Now, if you ask me, out of this pool of guys that are left, it's definitely a little ugly to me. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not very excited. At the very least, I'm not excited about them, to be very honest. But if I had to rank them, it will probably be Mike Vrabel, then Aaron Glenn or Anthony Weaver as the unknowns, because I'll take my chance with an unknown at this point, and then it's maybe Dan Quinn. And I'm not mentioning Bill Belichick for a reason, so go ahead and give up on Bill Belichick, at least on my end. Please no Bill Belichick. I'll take Dan Quinn over Bill Belichick. It's that bad. And just to remember, they only messed up if we don't win. So again, wait until December to start flipping tables. But it's definitely fair as us fans to question the process. But again, don't let it affect whether you watch the games or not, if you go to the games or not. Give them the benefit of the doubt and then check back in December to see where we are. And then you can overreact and all of that type of stuff. But again, I give everybody complete right to question this process because I'm questioning what's going on right now. That's why I'm posing a lot of questions, a lot of theories, a lot of rumors and things like that. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. I'm gonna keep y'all updated on every little thing going on. If we hire a head coach tonight, of course I'll be making a video on that immediately, doing a deep dive into who he is, who he may potentially bring in as a defensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, positives, negatives of the hire, everything like that. So make sure y'all stay tuned. And then again, once we get all of this stuff out the way and we can finally start to get to the stuff I consider fun, like my favorite stuff, like free agency and especially the draft, man, I can't wait, man. So stay tuned for all of that. I appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.